In my previous video, I explained some things about biblical principles that the cults know and use by turning them upside down and backwards to achieve their purposes. And one thing they desire is for people they torture to dissociate. Dissociated parts are very important to the cult, but at the same time, they have enabled the abused person to survive. So, as a child goes through rituals and dissociates, splits away from the mainstream consciousness and forms like a separate identity, it's not really separate, it's still part of their mind, but it's behind a wall of amnesia. So they are able to forget what happened, for the most part. Now, these children grow up, and they become adults. And the abuse never stops. And this is because of the programming that was done to them by the cult. And the programming continues, and it controls them. So they're never free. Even though they're out from under parental control, they may have good jobs in their own families, they're still enslaved to the cult because of what was done to them and the programming that was put in them when they were little. And I would like to explain that now. Parts are programmed to work against themselves. Dissociated parts, or we sometimes call them alternate personalities or alters, were programmed to work against the person. And these parts were formed purposely by torture. They would torture the child and command that the child do something it couldn't possibly do. And so the child would split. They would torture some more. They would split. They would split. And they would split until finally they got a part that would do what they wanted it to do. For example, let's say the child was in a ceremony where a baby was killed, and then they cut off parts of the baby and demand that you eat them, that you eat this part, this raw meat from this dead baby. And of course, it makes you want to vomit to even think about it. So the child can't do it. So the child is tortured, and they're then given this flesh to eat again. He can't do it. Torture, and he splits and splits and splits until finally there's a part that is able to do it. And this is the part that the cult wants, because this part had to be very strong in order to do it. And they want the parts to be strong. And the part that it was strong to do it is also probably comprised of mostly sin nature, because the good parts that couldn't possibly do it split away. And so they get up the part that they want. And then that part is given a name and is given an assignment to do. And he is assigned a code number that the child, this part can be accessed whenever the cult wants to. And then it's placed in the inner world inside the person. Every abused person has some kind of an inner world. Because the outer world was too painful, they had to go inward. And that's how they escaped in their mind, through dissociation. Now, this inner world has a structure, and the cult devises this inner structure. Inside this person, there is the conscious part of the mind, but then underneath that are layers of unconscious mind, where parts that split off live in these lower levels of the unconscious mind. Now, this is all put together much like the layers of a cake, one layer on top of another, on top of another, or we could call them different levels. Think of like an apartment building that's different floors, and there's stairs going from floor to floor. Well, it can be like that in their inner world, and they have staircases going from floor to floor. Now, at the head of each staircase is a demon in charge. And if a lower part wants to go up to the upper levels, it has to give a password to get through, to get up to the upper levels. Now, the upper levels of a person's inner structure would be the parts of the person that lives life. because all they've ever known about coping in life is dissociation. They have dissociated all their life into many, many parts. So they may have a part that is good in math. They may have a part that's good in English. They may have a part that's a wife, another part that's a mother, another part that goes to work. So all these parts work to help this person cope with life. But then underneath that, there are parts that they don't know anything about. But the parts that are lower levels in the unconscious mind know about what's going on in the upper levels. We call the upper levels the presenting levels. And so from time to time, those parts in the lower level, many of them who have been given assignments, can come up and take charge of the body. So, these parts are given assignments, and here are some assignments they may have been given. One common assignment is to take the person out to rituals. So when the person is grown, is left home, has established their own life, they can still be getting up in the middle of the night and going out to rituals, and they don't know it. Because a part in their lower unconscious mind was programmed to take them out, and that part is controlled by demons. For example, the first lady that I ministered to for this kind of abuse knew she was going out. She would find her shoes in a different place than where she had placed them the night before. She was sure she locked her door the night before, but she would get up in the morning and find it unlocked. There were several signs that she was going out. So we began to pray and ask Jesus to show her what was the program in her that was causing her to go out. So we met a part that was in the lower part of her inner structure, and this part said that she would tell us what the program is that takes her out. But first, she wanted Jesus to be her Savior, because she knew that Jesus could protect her from retaliation that would come against her for telling us. And so she proceeded to tell us that in the programming, this person believed she was a robot. This was another part inside believed that she was a robot. And there was a demon stationed at every major joint in the body, like 4 up and down the spine. There were demons on either shoulder, at the elbows, at the wrists, demons at the hip joint, the knee joint, the ankle joint, and they all worked in conjunction to take her out. So all we needed to do was to break that programming and cast the demons out of all those joints. And so we did, and then she stopped going out to rituals. There are parts assigned to tell her she's disgusting, ugly, and stupid, and will never amount to anything in life. And those instructions given to the part are empowered by demons. Another possible program behavior in a part might be to punish the person if anything good happens. If something good happens, she has to punish herself. There was one lady, I was just getting to know her. I knew she was very severely abused. She was in our church, and I invited her to go to lunch with me one day, so I took her out to lunch. And when we got back to my house, she told me later she went in the bathroom and made herself vomit because she did not deserve to go out with a pastor's wife and have a nice dinner. There are parts that are programmed to not read the Bible. If the person tries to read the Bible, they fall asleep. They hear noise in their head. They cannot concentrate. Some parts are programmed to appear insane. That if this person starts getting help from a counselor who knows what they're doing, then there's parts, or who doesn't know what they're doing, there are parts supposed to come up that appear insane. Now, I recognized what was going on with this person when it happened. I also knew she had 13 levels in her structure, in her inner structure. So a part acted insane, and Jesus and I ministered to that part. And then another part appeared that was acting insane. And I just figured, well, there must be 13 of them. And there were. I think that counseling session ran about 3.5 or 4 hours. But we dealt with all of those. You see, the cult would want her to convince any counselor that she was insane. That counselor would have her admitted to the psychiatric ward of a hospital. And they can be accessed by cult people in hospitals. That is not a safe place. So the last thing we want to do is for someone we're ministering to go to a psychiatric hospital. We don't want them to do that. But they don't have to when Jesus is in charge. Another common programmed behavior is to kill themselves if they ever talk. And I have met parts like this, and you wonder why would they kill themselves if they started to talk? Well, it's because this part doesn't know that she lives in this person's body. That's right. They can program parts to not know they live in the body of the person they're supposed to kill. And so the way I dealt with that was to hand her a mirror and say, this is you. She said, no, that's not me. I said, yes, it is. Stick out your tongue. She did. Finally, I was able to convince her that she did live in this person's body. If she killed this person, she killed herself. So she was willing to give up her job. We got the demons out of her. So this is just an idea of some of the things that can be going on in a person. There can be parts programmed to make the person sick, all kinds of things that sabotage the person and ruin their life. And so you might hear all this and think, well, how could anybody minister for all of this? Well, the answer is we can't. But Jesus can. Jesus knows all of this. And so when I minister, we always start with prayer, and we ask Jesus to go into the person's inner structure and find the part he wants us to deal with on that particular day. And so it's really the Lord who is deprogramming them. And I think you can see how there isn't any training that would enable a person to dismantle all of this if the person were in charge of it. You know, if I were to say, okay, we're going to go to level 5 today, and we're going to do this or that or the other thing, that doesn't work. You just say, Jesus, who do you want us to meet today? And then we minister to whatever he brings up. And that's what works. So it's important to realize only Jesus knows this. And that's why it's so important that the church get involved in this kind of ministry, because we're the ones that can do it. And we don't have to have a lot of special training. What I've shared with you today, I've learned by experience, by ministering to other people.